Let's go after the drug lords where they live, with an international strike force. There must be no safe haven for these narco-terrorists, and they must know it.
Hey, welcome back to the show. We've got a couple of stories to cover today, starting with the allegations from the Washington Post that the Secretary of War ordered a double tap or a second strike on 2 drug runners after their boat have been disabled. We're also going to talk about the latest with Venezuela, and then we're going to cover some immigration news. So let's go ahead and start with our first story. And what I want to do, instead of just showing you what's happening now and what's happened recently, I want to take you kind of like through a timeline, so that you can make your own judgment on what happened and how you should see the situation and how it unfolded. So let's take a look at how CNN reported this when it first happened.
Get right to what America's talking about: war crimes and whether Pete Hegseth committed one. The Pentagon strikes on alleged boats in the Caribbean. They are raising serious alarms from both sides of the aisle tonight. Despite a debate about whether the administration has the authority to even strike the boats, 22 of them have been sunk. More than 80 people killed in those strikes. And now the reports seem to indicate that one of those strikes left no survivors. And a follow-up strike or a double tap was ordered to kill everyone on board that craft.
And now let's take a look at what President Trump had to say about the situation and the Secretary of War.
Number one, I don't know that happened. And Pete said he did not want them. He didn't even know what people were talking about.
The Washington Post initially reported on this story, stating that they had some officials from the Pentagon that had verified this story. The issue is that their sources were anonymous. So what does that mean? That means you could pretty much make the story up and say, well, the sources are anonymous, they don't want to be revealed. And then if somebody questions that, the Washington Post can simply say, these are my sources, I have a right to protect these sources, they have a right to be protected. And since we don't have access to those sources, we can't validate that the story is true. So of course, this story grew legs and it absolutely took off. So to get ahead of this story, the White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, came out and stated that the Secretary of War was not in the room. He was not the one that gave that command for the second strike, that it was Admiral Bradley. Let's take a look at that.
Secretary Hegseth authorized Admiral Bradley to conduct these kinetic strikes. Admiral Bradley worked well within his authority and the law. Admiral Bradley worked well within his authority and the law. He has the authority to kill them, and that's what this administration is doing. Admiral Bradley worked well within his authority and the law, directing the engagement to ensure the boat was totally destroyed.
Okay, now after watching this clip, I know the common day American sees it and says, well, they're just passing blame onto the Admiral, right? He's the scapegoat. But let me explain to you how the military structure works and why the United States is so effective when it comes to our military operations. We have something called centralized command, decentralized control. That means that the Secretary of War is responsible for the readiness of the armed forces of the United States. But he delegates authority to the commanders on the ground and the combatant commanders so that they can make those time-sensitive decisions. That's what makes this country great and effective when it comes to warfighting. So what you see here is not the press secretary passing blame onto Admiral Bradley. She is explaining that there was authority delegated to him to make these calls, to make these types of decisions. So if she were to say, well, yeah, the Secretary of War is the one that made that call, that is inaccurate because he's not the one that made the call. Now, if something would have happened where this was an illegal order, then the Secretary of War is still not to blame for this. It would be Admiral Bradley because he delegated that authority to him. Now, can he get blasted for it? Absolutely. But ultimately, Admiral Bradley is the one that made this call. But that's not going to stop the left-wing media from continuing to run away with this story. Listen to this.
I was taking a step back from this, Nicole. I don't understand why we're going to war with Venezuela. And I'm not sure the administration has even bothered to try to come up with anything even internally coherent in terms of explaining why Trump has proclaimed that we are at war with Venezuela. My sense is that they wanted to use the Alien Enemies Act to illegally deport people, arrest and deport people from this country that actually weren't subject to deportation. They decided the Alien Enemies Act was a way to do that. They then realized the Alien Enemies Act required a war, so then they declared a war. Then they needed a reason for the war, so then they reverse engineered some sort of reason for the war. Mm-hmm.
Just to be clear here, this administration has never declared war on anybody. Article 1 allows one entity to declare war. That is the Congress of the United States of America. However, Article 2 empowers the president to be the commander-in-chief and make these types of decisions. You know, it's just incredible to hear these people go against these boat strikes. We already know that interdiction operations over the water were not working. They were not working. These operations have reduced drugs coming in through the waterways by 91%. And this is the same left-wing media that talks about empathy and caring for people, right? And everybody's rights. Where are the rights of the 28 million Venezuelan people who are currently undergoing political oppression by a murderer? People are being tortured every day. People are being murdered every day. I don't hear the media talking about that. Nobody's talking about that. Why not? Instead, they are focusing on these drug runners and whether we should be killing them or not. In case you're wondering how bad Maduro's regime is, I just read a story on NPR about a surgeon, elderly lady, renowned surgeon in Venezuela. She sent a casual text message to her son and a couple of other people talking about how bad the situation was in Venezuela. Food insecurity, people are starving. I don't have the necessary medical equipment to really tend to people. Somehow somebody in that group got that message to the Venezuelan government. That lady was picked up the next day in her house. She was thrown in prison. There was a sham trial, and she is still in prison, and she is not coming out. That is the type of thing that is happening in Venezuela. I don't hear the media talking about that. Why aren't they talking about that? Instead, we are focused on protecting these drug runners that are bringing poison into the United States. Why are we not focused on the Venezuelan people who voted to elect Maduro out of office last year?
So what are we doing there in the first place? Why are we blowing out of the water and killing people in boats with outboard motors, some of which aren't even pointed towards the United States, let alone verified to have drugs on them?
Why does the media feel entitled to top secret information? Why do they think that they need to be briefed on secret and top secret intelligence? Why? They're not entitled to intelligence. They're not. So when you hear them say, well, we don't have evidence, yeah, no crap, you don't have evidence. That doesn't mean that the evidence isn't there. Any strikes that are being conducted now illegally, they're going to be exposed in the future. So we will know if these are illegal. But just like it was said in the news, whenever any of these strikes are conducted, there are lawyers there. When I was in Afghanistan, there were lawyers there. Before any strike, the first question that was asked, Judge, what's going on? Can we strike? If the judge or the judge advocate said yes or no, if the judge advocate said no, we didn't strike. The strike was illegal. That call is made in real time. So if these strikes were illegal, they wouldn't be happening. Now I'm going to play you one final clip from Rachel Maddow, which is absurd. She gets emotional when she's talking about how some of the people that are executing these commands are going to be thrown in prison. Take a look here.
So now they have put this admiral, the commander of Southern Command, every senior officer in that command, and all of the servicemen and women who serve there in the position of potentially being held liable for murder or war crimes until the statute of limitations on those matters runs. And I don't even know what it would be. And by backing and bumbling and shambolically rambling themselves into this mess, I'm less worried about the fate of the bad guys who have gotten us here than I am about the good people who've been put in the way of this mess.
Well, thank God she's not worried about the drug dealers. That's awesome that she's not worried about the drug dealers. But she doesn't have to worry about the military personnel either. Because if any of these orders were illegal, I can tell you right now they'd be disobeyed. Military service members are trained on this. If it is an illegal order, do not follow it. That's why the video that was put out by the politicians was ridiculous. You know, I continue listening to these reporters that don't know anything about the military. And it's comical to me the way that they make it seem like nobody wants to serve in the military today. Recruiting numbers are through the roof. Why are they through the roof? Because they are letting us fight wars again. The military is no longer a social experiment. So these reporters need to stop looking like clowns by saying that a lot of the service members now are not happy with what they're doing in the military, because they are. You know, but enough of the left-wing media. The Democrats are also hypocrites. I think a lot of people like to forget one of the missions that was authorized by President Obama when we were trying to kill all of ISIS. Listen to this.
Now, the very interesting part of this story for the Democratic Party is Barack Obama. So I wrote a book called Killing the Killers. And in that book, we chronicle almost on a daily basis how President Obama destroyed ISIS in western Iraq. No prisoners, Leland.
Right.
If the special forces went into a camp, everyone died, including al-Baghdadi's 8-year-old son. Okay, the orders were destroy ISIS. Barack Obama gave the order. There wasn't any sorting out of people, wasn't any of that. The Democratic Party did not say one blanking word.
That's right, you guys heard that right. Al-Baghdadi was killed, and so was his 8-year-old son. The order given by President Obama was kill everybody. Everybody dies. I don't hear anybody talking about that. Nobody is mentioning that that happened before. Why is it that everybody cares that we're killing these narco-terrorists right now? That's right, because it's President Trump in office. That's the only reason this matters right now. And let me be clear here. I'm not defending President Trump's policies. It's up to you to make that judgment call. I just present the information. And if you don't think President Obama giving that order to kill everybody was enough to convince you that the Democrats are hypocrites, let's listen to what Joe Biden said.
Let's go after the drug lords where they live with an international strike force. There must be no safe haven for these narco-terrorists, and they must know it.
Just to reiterate, let's go after the narcos where they live. There should be no safe haven. What does that sound like? It sounds like what President Trump is doing right now. So it wasn't an issue back then. Why is it an issue now? Especially if in the process, we are going to free a country. We are going to free the Venezuelan people. Why shouldn't we do it? So now that I've presented all that information to you, let's listen to what Republican Senator Tom Cotton said he was briefed by Admiral Bradley.
I saw 2 survivors trying to flip a boat loaded with drugs down for the United States, back over so they could stay in the fight. And potentially, given all the context we heard, of other narco-terrorist boats in the area coming to their aid to recover their cargo and recover those narco-terrorists. And just like you would blow up a boat off of the Somali coast or the Yemeni coast, and you'd come back and strike it again if it still had terrorists and it still had explosives or missiles, Admiral Bradley and Secretary Hegseth did exactly what we would expect them to do.
So what you heard Senator Cotton say was that there was a potential for those terrorists, those narco-terrorists, to recoup those drugs, maybe get picked up by other terrorists, and then continue that journey to the United States. That's what you heard him say, right? Now let's hear how the Democrats saw it.
Admiral Bradley and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff did the right thing. Admiral Bradley defended the decisions taken, and Admiral Bradley has a storied career, and he has my respect, and he should have the respect of all of us. But what I saw in that room was one of the most troubling things I've seen in my time in public service. You have 2 individuals in clear distress, without any means of locomotion, with a destroyed vessel, who were killed by the United States. The last thing I'm going to say is that the Admiral confirmed that there had not been a kill them all order, and that there was not an order to grant no quarter.
So this whole statement is a word salad. He's saying that Admiral Bradley did the right thing, that he defended his decision, that he explained exactly why he did what he did, but he still finds that what he did was wrong. How can you start out by saying that he did the right thing and then say that he did the wrong thing? They cannot bring themselves to agree with any decision made by anyone in the Trump administration. That's the problem. So the whole story from the Washington Post was pretty much fabricated. And what's going to be the consequence for a fabricated story? Because how many Americans do you think read that story and said, look at this, the Trump administration is conducting illegal strikes on stranded fishermen? Because that's what they're calling them now, fishermen, not narco-terrorists, because they're trafficking drugs. They're calling them fishermen. Absolutely ridiculous. Now, I told you guys previously in this video that when I was in Afghanistan, I was in charge of the airspace in a very kinetic area. It was a very kinetic area. A lot of action was going on the ground, and the troops on the ground called for air support all the time. I was the person in charge of the airspace that provided that support. Whenever we conducted strikes, especially if we use something like fixed-wing FA-18s or anything like that, the first aircraft comes in, he conducts a strike, Dash 2 is right behind him. If the target is not destroyed, meaning people as well, that second aircraft comes in and conducts a strike as well. If there needs to be a repeat, that aircraft comes around, Dash 1, and he'll strike again. Forget about a second strike. You can conduct several strikes on the same target until it's destroyed. But if you don't believe this is what happens, listen to General Keane talk about this.
If you have an operation on the ground, then you have wounded soldiers as a result of it. Of course, we don't kill those wounded soldiers because we're in control. Actually, the obligation is to take them prisoner, and after our wounded is treated, treat those as wounded and evacuate them. But these are isolated events. airstrikes done sometimes on the ground or sometimes at sea, and there's nobody there in control of the situation. So if the target is people or it's a facility, and both of those are important, the objective is to kill the people and destroy the facility. If the target is a boat and people, the mission is to destroy the boat and kill the people. In about 25% of these kind of attacks, we do reattack. Either if the facility was the objective, to destroy the rest of the facility. If the people is the objective, to kill the rest of the people. That's just the reality of what we're dealing with. And people got to get their head around this, and they're misinterpreting what is taking place here.
So just to reiterate what he just said, if the target is people and a boat, then they both have to be destroyed. If the boat survives, a follow-on attack is warranted. If the people survive, a follow-on attack is warranted. When I was in Afghanistan and we had high-value targets, high-value individuals that we'd been looking for weeks, sometimes months, and we had positive ID that that was the person we were looking at, we conducted a strike, and if a follow-on strike was needed, we did it again. Why? Because if that person gets away and they recover, they're going to continue to do the same thing. So they still present a danger to American forces or to civilians. So a follow-on attack is warranted. Who's to say that these drug runners aren't going to get on a boat and do the exact same thing? Nobody knows. And what if they do? So it is essential, it is critical that we take everybody out. But we all know it was only a matter of time until somebody related to one of these fishermen filed a suit against the United States for conducting these strikes. Take a look.
First of all, what are you seeking in this petition against the United States officials?
Well, as you mentioned, the family, of course, wants compensation. They've lost their chief breadwinner. By the way, he earned his money by being a fisherman. He was out fishing for marlin and tuna when he was killed. But the other thing they want equally is to end these killings. They want to deter the United States from continuing to do this in the future.
The Trump administration has gone very hard on those in these boats. We've talked to many different lawmakers who have yet to see the evidence that they are narco-terrorists or drug traffickers, but that is what the administration is saying that they are. What is the evidence that you will use to show that your client is not that your client, as you say, is a fisherman?
Well, first of all, the onus is not on us to prove he was innocent. It's on them to prove he was guilty. By the way, all these people are innocent because where I come from, you're innocent until proven guilty. But in any case, his family, the Fishermen's Association that he was part of, can all say that he was a fisherman and that's what he was doing.
You know, this guy said that everybody's innocent until proven guilty. Yes, that is true. Unless you are caught red-handed, leaving a factory full of drugs, loading those drugs on a boat, and then you get on that boat and you start heading towards the United States, then you're guilty. You're absolutely guilty. Once again, people like this lawyer don't understand the type of intelligence that we collect on these people before we conduct a strike. We know who these people are. Take a close look at those boats. What does it look like they're carrying? Diapers? Those are drugs. That is cocaine. That is fentanyl that's coming from those boats. Nothing's going to come out of this suit because if that guy was struck on a boat carrying drugs, he was obviously a narco-terrorist. And this leads us to our next story, which is Venezuela. Maduro continues to do everything he can to dissuade President Trump from taking him out of power. His latest move is to resort to dancing for the American people.
Esto se llama lenguaje tarzaneado. Tipo Tarzán sería sí paz, sí paz, sí paz por siempre. Sí paz, paz, paz. Not war, death speech, the people United States. De parte de the people Bolivarian Republic.
That's right, that was his no war, just peace dance. Made a dance specifically for the American people to try to convince them to convince the president not to take action against them. Where is the justice for those political prisoners that he has in jail right now? Where is peace for those people that he's butchered and massacred? Where's peace for them? Now, if you remember, one of Maduro's genius moves was to empty his jails. Send all those people to the United States. What that did was that took the burden away from Venezuela and put it on the United States. That was made possible by the previous administration's open border policy. That's why a lot of these gang members pushed into sanctuary cities, because they knew immigration wasn't going to pursue them there. Now, Maduro did have a phone call with President Trump. Listen to what President Trump said about the phone call.
Times reported that you had a phone call with Maduro. Did you?
I don't want to comment on it. The answer is yes.
And can you tell us a little bit about it?
No, I can't do that.
Mr. President, would you say it went well?
I wouldn't say it went well or badly. It was a phone call.
Now, I like the fact that President Trump didn't discuss the details of the conversation, but listen to Jesse Waters talk about them.
The choice is Maduro's. Trump's giving him an ultimatum. Abdicate power or else. After Trump's phone call with the dictator, that's the best offer. This time, it wasn't a perfect phone call. The Venezuelan strongman reportedly asked for global amnesty. And Trump said, how about no? Then he said, what if I hold free and fair elections? Trump said, no, you already did that and you lost. Then he asked, if I step down, can I still control the military? 47 said, pack your bags.
So these claims from Maduro are ridiculous. He wants to retain control of the military. Ridiculous. He wants to hold free and fair elections. Remember, we already gave him that opportunity. In the previous administration, we had 2 of his nephews and 1 of his henchmen. We released them from prison under the promise that he was going to hold free and fair elections. Did that happen? It didn't happen. So if he thinks that President Trump is going to fall for that, it's not going to happen. I think Maduro's best move is to take whatever the United States gives him. We all know that he's got millions of dollars stashed away somewhere that he's stolen from the Venezuelan people. Take whatever option the United States gives you, leave to whatever country they let you leave to, and just go. So now let's talk about our next topic of the day, which is immigration.
The Trump administration has dramatically ramped up its crackdown on illegal immigration and is also looking at those in the country on asylum, as this Afghan national suspect was. The State Department has essentially paused all refugee admissions and immigration from 19 countries of concern. It is also pushing allies to scale back on their immigration. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem posted last night she is recommending a full travel ban on every country that's been flooding our nation with killers, leeches, and entitlement junkies. Those are her words. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt with more on what the administration is doing.
The Trump administration is now actively re-examining all of the Afghans imported into the country by Joe Biden. It is more important than ever to finish carrying out the president's mass deportation operation. America cannot allow millions upon millions of unvetted illegal aliens to be rewarded with amnesty after they broke our nation's laws to come here. We also are taking a look at those who are already in the interior of our country and removing them if they are here illegally, and also taking a look at these visas.
So I've mentioned this before, but whenever anything happens with immigration, which is one of President Trump's strong suits, he never reacts lightly. It's always a very strong reaction. Hence the reason they're banning immigration from these 19 countries. Now, when President Trump is asked how long this ban is going to last, he said this.
How long does your administration plan to pause asylum into the U.S.?
I think a long time.
Can you give any?
We don't want those people. We have enough problems. We don't want those people.
Is that a year, 2 years?
No time limit.
And then
But it could be a long time.
you said there.
We don't want those people. Do you understand that?
And by those people, he's talking about anybody that comes from those 19 countries. And he didn't just pick these out of the blue. These are countries that historically have produced some of the worst terrorists in this country's history. I don't think anybody is saying that all Afghans are bad. What we're saying is that we need to take a look at the Allies Welcome Program to ensure that we don't have any other extremists in this country. Remember, it is extremely difficult for Afghans to assimilate into American culture. They're coming from a country where males dominate everything. Males dominate everything into a secular country where women have equal rights. That is not an easy thing to overcome. We are talking about these men coming from countries where honor killings are legal. If a daughter dishonors your family, it's okay to kill her. That's what happens in these countries. That's why ethical behavior is based on societal norms. Our societal norms here don't allow that. In Afghanistan and other countries in the Middle East, it's okay. Remember what I told you. A lot of these Afghans committed atrocities against their own people. Now they come here to a foreign culture that they cannot assimilate into, and they start thinking, maybe the atrocities that I committed against my people were a mistake. Now, my former friends are now my enemies. They made me commit these atrocities, and now I need to pay them back. Okay, those are the stories for today. I hope you guys enjoyed them. Like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, stay balanced.